Welcome, everyone. Shana Tova, and thank you for joining us for today's JDCA, Jewish Democratic Council of America program with our very special guest, my Governor, Gretchen Whitmer. My name is Marcy Orley, and I'm a proud Michigander and JDCA board member. As Jews, as Democrats, and as Americans, we at JDCA are defending our values. With our democracy and reproductive rights on the ballot in November, it is more important than ever before that we elect leaders who are committed to defend our democracy, our rights, and uphold the values we have always held sacrosanct. With the midterm election in just 5 weeks, your voice and your support are more crucial than ever before. Jewish voters will play a pivotal role in electing Democrats across the country. This is especially true in the great state of Michigan, where we are so fortunate to have Gretchen Whitmer as our governor. Governor Whitmer, thank you for spending time with us today to discuss the stakes of this election. I would now like to turn it over to a member of JDCA's new leadership council, David Kramer. David?
Thanks so much, Marcy. And thanks to all of you for joining today. Shana Tova. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our special guest, a great friend of JDCA and a friend of mine, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Governor Whitmer has served as our governor for 4 years. She won a landslide victory in the 2018 elections. While in office, Governor Whitmer has worked tirelessly for the people of our state. She's been on a mission to fix the damn roads and to improve Michigan's education standards. The governor this year signed a landmark $5 billion package to rebuild Michigan's infrastructure and has made the largest investment in public schools in our history. Governor Whitmer, is running for re-election this year against a Trump-endorsed MAGA Republican who seeks to ban abortions in Michigan, even in the case of rape and incest. And I will add that her resume is about as thin as this piece of paper. We are proud to support Governor Whitmer in her quest for re-election. We are honored to have her join us today. Governor Whitmer, thank you so much for being here. And I'd like to pass it now to JDCA's CEO and a proud East Lansing native herself, Haley Seufer. Haley.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Governor, for being with us today. We are proud to support you, and we're thrilled to have this conversation with you today about the stakes in the midterm election. So we'll just jump right in. As you know, the number one issue for Jewish voters in the midterms, and frankly for American voters, is the future of our democracy. In Michigan, there are still Republicans, including your opponent, who denied the outcome of the 2020 election, despite dozens of court cases and numerous audits. Most recently, there are reports of Michigan Republicans advising poll workers in 2022 to break the rules while monitoring elections. What can we all do to defend our democracy and combat Republican-led voter suppression and election subversion efforts in this and future elections?
Well, thank you, Haley, for teeing up that question and for your leadership. And thank you all for giving me some of your time tonight. And thank you for the work that you're doing all across our country to protect democracy, to ensure that we've got leaders who never forget that they work for the people, and to see the humanity and fight for an opportunity for every single person in our country. As we think about the incredible challenges and the rise in hate and anti-Semitism and the efforts to undermine our democracy, now is more than ever crucial that we are all doing our part. And so I really appreciate the question. I think that as we prepare for an election that's 41 days away, that we are voting, that we are knocking doors, that we are making calls to our friends and family. Everyone on this call has a network of people that loves you and respects you and wants to know where you are at in this upcoming election. We've been through a couple of very challenging years, and people are overwhelmed and just trying to get their lives back on track. So not everyone's watching as closely as we all are. And that's why we can't assume that everyone appreciates how high the stakes are. I know it feels like we say it every single election cycle, that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And it's not that we're being hyperbolic. It's just that the stakes continue to get higher. And so I'm always going to fight for Michiganders' fundamental right to vote and to make their voices heard. I support removing barriers to voting by establishing a permanent absentee voter list to speed up election results. Right now, I'm trying to get my legislature to give our clerks the ability to start processing absentee ballots just 48 hours early. We need to codify that. And I've called on the legislature to secure access to the ballot box by helping active duty Michiganders who are serving overseas be able to participate and ensure that their votes and their spouses' votes are counted. In 2020, we saw a record turnout, the most secure election in state history, administered by Republican, Democratic, and nonpartisan clerks across Michigan. But there are people in our state who are absolutely trying to undermine our confidence in our democratic institutions. We'll continue to push what is all based on the big lie and undermine Americans' trust and to silence the voices of voters. And so I'm honored to be in a position where I can put a stop to it through my vetoes of many bills that have been sent to me that makes it harder for people to vote. But every one of us between now and Election Day can do something every day to ensure that this is another high turnout election and that it is one that supports people that are fighting to protect our democracy, not undermine it or cut people out from the process of participating in it.
Well, thank you. And moving right along to another key issue in this election, access to abortion. Michigan was over a dozen states with so-called trigger laws that were expected to snap into effect after the Dobbs decision overturned. So far, Michigan courts have blocked that law, yet abortion access will be on the ballot in Michigan this year in the form of a constitutional amendment. What steps have you taken and will continue to take to defend abortion access in Michigan? And we are grateful for your efforts. You have been a champion in Michigan on this issue.
Well, this is something that is it's personal for every woman and girl and family, and it should remain that way, right? When Justice Ginsburg passed, we started to research what tools were available to me as governor to protect choice in Michigan. Michigan's been a proud pro-choice state for 49 years. And with the fall of Roe, we could go back 91 years to a law that makes it a felony, no exceptions for rape or incest. And so the work that we did was to understand state law and see what tools did I have. I filed a lawsuit before the Dobbs draft even became public because we knew with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett that this was a very real possibility. My lawsuit is the reason that we have an injunction from that 1931 law going into effect. I'm also grateful and proud to say that ACLU and Planned Parenthood and volunteers across Michigan collected a record number of signatures to put the issue before the people on the ballot November 8th. 753,000 signatures they turned in, most in Michigan history. And so it is crucial that we have used every tool at our disposal to protect this fundamental right. My lawsuit is still pending before the Michigan Supreme Court. I think that they are waiting to see what happens with the ballot initiative before they rule on my lawsuit. But I'm hopeful and I believe that because I know 70% of the people in the state support a woman being able to make that inherently personal, important decision, that we will be successful. But we don't stop until we win. And that's why this work that we're doing to increase voter turnout, to educate voters, to show how stark the contrast is between my opponent and me is so incredibly crucial to the education effort. As I said, a lot of people are working really hard just to try to get their lives back on track and their kids academically up to speed and are overwhelmed by what the last few years have thrown our way. So we cannot make the assumption that everyone appreciates how high these stakes are. And that's why this work, this education effort, this persuasion effort is so incredibly important. But I'm proud of the lawsuit that I filed as one of the first governors in the country to use a tool at my disposal to protect women's reproductive rights in Michigan. And I am determined to use every tool that we have to make sure we win this fight.
Thank you. The protests that occurred in Michigan in the spring of 2020 in response to stay-at-home orders, they were held outside and even inside the state capitol in Lansing. We saw those horrific images of men standing outside your office. And the whole scene was really, in many ways, a precursor for the January 6th insurrection. How do we effectively combat extremism and the threat that it poses to our community and country? And how have you done this effectively in Michigan?
Well, I wish I could tell you that we have successfully bat back all of the hatred and anti-Semitism and homophobia and misogyny that we've seen such an increase in over the last few years. We've not gotten distracted by it. We've not let it change how we conduct business and how we conduct ourselves. But threats of violence are this kind of dangerous rhetoric, unfortunately, completely permeates the Republican Party in Michigan right now. My opponent just last week with Donald Trump Jr. by her side and Kellyanne Conway made light of the threats to kidnap and execute me, the threats against my family. And so it's really shocking to the conscience that there are standard bearers for a major party in this state that continues to foment that ugliness and anger and dangerous activity. So I continue to stay focused on the fundamentals. I continue to try to model the behavior that I think we should expect from our public officials. And I've made civility a priority in my administration. But when people ask me, how do we combat this? We win. And it might sound self-serving when I say I have to win this race. That is one way. But if I'm not successful, I think that the people that continue to foment this will only be emboldened. And I think we'll have a harder time recruiting good people to serve in office, to run for office. And so I do think that accountability is crucial. I was grateful to see convictions in the second trial of some of these folks, but we have to win. We have to live our values. We have to hold people accountable, and we have to show that we can win doing both of those things.
Thank you. Well, you spoke specifically about the threats to you and your family, which were just horrific. And as you know, there have been repeated threats and anti-Semitism targeting the Jewish community. Even that day, going back to those protests in Lansing in the spring of 2020, there were signs with swastikas and references to Hail Whitmer that were held outside the Capitol. You have been an incredibly strong partner of the Jewish community, including in the fight for increased funding for Holocaust education and other efforts to combat anti-Semitism. Could you speak about these efforts specifically to counter anti-Semitism in Michigan?
Sure. So I think that one of the cruel realities that we're all navigating is that people don't even try to see the humanity in one another often in today's day and age. And I'm not talking about all people, and I'm certainly not talking about both sides. This is a unique issue on one political extreme. Hate and discrimination we have zero tolerance in Michigan. And so whether it is getting the Michigan Department of Civil Rights to investigate any instances of hateful rhetoric or hateful actions, or to sitting with our rabbis and Jewish leaders across Michigan and understanding how, for instance, the Michigan State Police can work with some of the efforts to keep people safe as they worship in synagogues. There's a lot of work that we are doing on a number of fronts in this space. Michiganders of all religions and all faiths deserve to feel safe and welcome and valued. And that's part of the that's one of the North Star that we follow as we do everything from what policy I will sign to how we prioritize Michigan budget items to how I conduct myself in public.
Thank you. Well, we are hopeful about this upcoming election. A lot has changed in the past few weeks. And generally, we have a sense of optimism about what lies ahead on November 8th. I'm wondering what gives you a sense of hope and optimism as it relates to the upcoming elections.
Well, I got to tell you, even on the hardest days, and I've certainly had more than my share of them in the last 4 years, started with a polar vortex to a pandemic to 500-year flooding events to lawsuits and recall efforts from my own legislature to a divisive national election to threats on my life. Even on the hardest days, I still feel optimistic too, Haley. I look at what is happening, what people are doing all across the state of Michigan. Every single bill that I've signed has been bipartisan, over 900 of them. We made the largest investment in K-12 education with a legislature that's very difficult to work with. We've gotten relief to Michiganders, and I've gotten an opportunity to get all across the state and get to see people who are solving problems and helping one another in their communities. I'll tell you that we saw in the midst of all this, a special election in Michigan in a very Trump strong community, a Democrat won who was running on individual liberties and on the values that I know we all share. I was so pleased to see that. The people of Kansas gave me hope when they voted overwhelmingly to protect women's reproductive rights in a red state. And so I think that there is reason to feel hopeful. I'm sober about how hard the challenge is and how much work we are going to have to do to realize the opportunity in this moment. And I'm concerned about, there are a lot of serious issues that I remain concerned about, but I know that we are up to this challenge. I know that we are the majority, even though there's a very loud, sometimes scary minority out there. The average person in Michigan is a good person who works hard and expects their government to work as hard and to be as good as they are. And that's why I feel hopeful about kind of what's on the horizon and what I think we are capable of accomplishing together.
Right. Well, I will say, as someone who grew up in East Lansing, Michigan, knowing that you would go on to be governor, I guess I didn't know at the time, but here we are, you give me hope. So thank you for your leadership. And in closing, I just wanted you to know we have well over 100 people listening from around the country that I think after hearing your views on these key issues that are the priorities of Jewish voters in this election can see that you share our values and our commitment to democracy and to a woman's right to choose and to ensuring that our communities are safe from the extremism that threatens us. And what message do you have for Jewish voters who are voting on those issues and want to make a difference in this election, not just in Michigan, but around the country? What can we do in the next 41 days to ensure we all don't wake up on November 9th wishing the outcome were different?
Well, everyone on this Zoom call has a network of people that respects and loves you. Use your network, right? Whether it is through your social media or direct outreach. Think about registering people to vote. If you are in a state like Michigan or Kansas or other states where there's so much on the line in this upcoming election, helping register people to vote. And I think one of the things that we've done over the course since the Dobbs decision is holding reproductive roundtables so that women can tell their stories and humanize what this issue is all about. It's about people. It's about each of our right to make our decisions about our health and our lives and the trajectory of our lives. So I think that we can't ever forget that each of us can make a difference. And if you register 10 people to vote a day between now and election day, that's 400 people that could make the difference in any of these elections. And so that's, I think, the most compelling way that anyone on this call can help. And if you're not able to do that, but you're simply are able to make a contribution to one of the Democratic governors in a frontline state like we're in, that's an important way to be helpful as well. And also, please eat a vegetable every day. We need the army of people to be strong and healthy and ready to continue this work every single day from now till the election. And then every day beyond. We can never take this democracy for granted. We can never let it atrophy because we haven't given it care in a long period of time. We've got to continue to strengthen it and to bring people into this moment. So thank you for the question, and thank you for the work that all of you do. On behalf of my fellow Democratic governors and my fellow Michiganders, I'm so appreciative that there are people in other parts of the country who are willing to help in these battleground states, because what happens in these states impacts all of us ultimately in the next national election. So I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Governor. Not just that woman from Michigan, you are that champion of our values in Michigan, and we appreciate it so much. From now, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Alter and Jordan Nodell to close this out and provide us with some important information about upcoming events. We promised everyone a short 30 minutes program, and that's what we're delivering. So thank you, Governor Whitmer, and over to Peter.
Thank you, Haley. I'm Peter Alter, a JDCA board member and the outreach chair, and a proud resident of the state of Michigan, and an even prouder supporter of Governor Whitmer. First, I again want to thank you, Governor Whitmer, for graciously sharing your time and your insights with us today. We truly are honored to have you join us, and we are so fortunate to have you as our governor. I would also like to thank all of you, all of the participants, for tuning into this conversation, this discussion today. I'm sorry that we have not been able to answer everybody's questions, but we did the best that we could. I thank you also for your support and hopefully your continued support of JDCA. We look forward to providing you and others with more opportunities to connect each of you and others with key Democratic leaders over the next few weeks before the November midterms. I will now pass over to my friend and our dedicated JDCA Mission Chapter lead, Jordan Nodell.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Governor Whitmer, for joining us. I'm Jordan Nodell, co-chair of the JDCA's Michigan chapter. As Peter had mentioned, there are many ways to get involved with the JDCA to ensure Democrats win in this upcoming election, and we have to win. Surveys show Jewish American Democratic voters by and large vote with our values. That's something to be proud of, and that's a means to mobilize others to get out and vote. With the JDCA, there are lots of opportunities for grassroots outreach and volunteering. We will be hosting daily phone and text banks for the Michigan chapter on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Not next week, Yom Kippur, but every Tuesday following until the election, we'll be doing phone and text banks. We would love you to join us. On October 18th, plans are that Attorney General Dana Nessel will be joining the phone bank call to give a talk with phone bankers before we reach out to other likely Jewish voters and encourage them to get out the vote. There's lots to do. If you're joining this call from outside Michigan, you can look on the JDCA website and get involved with your state's chapter. Anyone can phone bank in any state, especially as the race tightens. We welcome all of your involvement, and we thank you for your support and participation with the JDCA. With that, wish you all a sweet and blue New Year. Shana Tova. Thanks, everyone.